Okay, thank you everybody for being patient, and we're excited to be here with you today. So like I said, my name is Danny Anderson, and I'm here with Jake Moy. We'll talk a little bit about us in a second. Before we get too far into it, we have some housekeeping items we like to go over. So there is audio access via either your computer or your phone, but obviously if you want the visuals of what's happening, that's available as well, and you would have to go into the Zoom video. If you have any questions about what we're presenting within Zoom, you can submit your questions to us. If you also have any connectivity issues or anything, use the chat and we'll reach out to you. A lot of the data that we're going to show, especially when we get into the demo, is best seen if your screen is in full screen mode. So you're going to want to maximize your window to be able to see a lot of what we're going to go through. And as with all of our webinars, this is being recorded and we'll make this available after the event. So that is there for you. So like I said, my name is Danny Anderson. I'm the Vice President of Product here at Numetric, and I'm joined with Jake Moy. Jake is a success manager here, but he's also a civil engineer by trade. And so Jake comes with both a software background, but also an industry understanding. And so it's great to have his views on what we're doing, because with what we do, the software that we make, it is so vital to have industry experts and actually have the help of engineers to ensure that what we're making is correct and what's going to be used in the field. So we thank Jake for being with us and helping us as we develop these products. So what we're going to learn today and what we're going to discuss are the challenges that arise from traditional approaches to concept level cost estimates. Also about how evolving to a data-driven approach can address these challenges, and steps that you can take to evolve to a data-driven approach, what it looks like in a cloud-based application. So really, I mean, to say it another way, where we're at now, where we're going, and where we should be in the future, right? So let's talk about where we're at, the current state of concept level cost estimates on pavement projects. So the very first thing you have to do is identify areas for consideration. We're not going to talk about this too much, but as you know, this can come from a variety of different sources. So the very first thing you have is a list you're working from or a request from somebody. The next thing you have to do is actually go collect and query all the data that you need, which not only means going to disparate places to get the data, but you actually have to know if the data exists and how to get it. Then once you do that, once you have all that information, it's usually come from different places and you have to combine them in such a way that you can actually analyze that data. After you analyze the data and put together what your thoughts are, the last piece is trying to create a report to submit to compare to other reports that are made that analyze data and analyze these concepts. So let's walk through what some of the problems are, some of the gotchas that as you approach this. A single cost estimate takes weeks to produce. So why does it take weeks to produce? The first part is what we were just discussing with the information. It's difficult to get the information, period. But then joining spatial, relational, and other data sources is difficult. And combining them in such a way that you can compare them quickly is it's nearly impossible unless you have a tool to do it. And since these data sources are coming from different tools, it's hard to know how to combine them and when to combine them. So this leads to inconsistency in analysis and bids. As we were speaking to one state lately, they were talking about how every region or district in their state is doing it differently. So when it comes to the actual central location to start looking through the bids and making decisions, the very first thing that whole group of people need to do is go through all of the bids and reports and try to normalize them, first of all, because they're so inconsistent. And so instead of getting in and jumping into understanding what the reports say and what they should do, they actually have to do a whole QA, QC process just on those reports to normalize them, to understand them the same. So they have to do that step so that they can actually do something close to an apples to apples comparison. But until they actually normalize the data, they can't even do that apples to apples comparison. And what this really does is it reduces the ability to maximize your resources, because so much data work and just rehashing of data is going on. And so this is what we go through every day. This shouldn't be new to us. This is the water we swim in, right? So let's talk about Numetric's approach to concept level cost estimates. Well, for Numetric, it all starts with the data. Derek Kahn, the Undersecretary of Transportation Policy for the US DOT, said, data integration is one of the greatest unlocks of our lifetime. Now, if that's a new term to you, the idea of data integration and why he's saying it's one of the greatest unlocks of our lifetime, he would also then go on to say it's the most underutilized resource within our GovTech industry right now. Data integration means having multiple sources of data in one single place, being able to analyze disparate sources of data at the same time. So as he says, data integration is one of the greatest unlocks of our lifetime. So how do we do it? Another piece of this is, well, it all begins with the data. So you have signs, you have barriers, LRS, markings, utilities, rumble strips, pavement, right? And these things some can come from one source, some come from various sources, but you begin with all of the data. An interesting thing to understand is how often people are asked to take all of this data and normalize it before they can even use a tool, which makes me love this quote from Scott Jones, where it says, Numetric is great because they don't force you to change your data to work with their products. Numetric takes the data we already have and makes it work with their tools. So really, that's what we're doing. We're taking all of those underlying data structures and we're putting them together in a way that integrates and makes it easily accessible to our partners. So how do we do it? It really comes down to three piers of Numetric. The first is enhanced searchability. What we're able to do is take these relational, spatial, free-form text databases and put them together in a way that can be understood at the same time. And as we go through the demo, you'll see Jake will show you some of those ways that information that you usually never see together appears together. And not only does it appear together, it appears naturally in a way that you can understand the big picture. Second, if you're using any kind of analytics tool, you need to have, for wide adoption to occur, there needs to be a high degree of confidence. So you have to enforce consistency. You have to make sure that you can do those apples to apples comparisons quickly, which means there needs to be a lot of QA and QC process around things like, are the assets in the correct place? Are they the right assets? And resolve any contradictions before it's even displayed. And the last piece is, this tool needs to be used. It needs to be adopted. And the way that you get adoption and the way that you get people within an organization to buy in is to give them a product that works well, a product that works quickly, a product that is easy to use, and a product that can be shared. People's findings can be shared with each other quickly. And that's what this safety analytics platform does for Numetric, is it allows us to share information as quickly as it can be created. So on top of this platform, Numetric has a host of purpose-built applications. We're going to discuss the project design app today, but the cool thing is by doing all of this underlying work with this data, we can fuel all of these different, what seem like disparate data sources into a single point of truth. And now you can look at your data however you want to. And one of them, like I said, is the project design. So let's talk about that. But before we do, let's talk about what people who have been using the project design app have been able to say. So Stan Burns, the former director of asset management at UDOT, said, Numetric is easy to use, fast, and intuitive. It helps my organization quickly query through our inventory of over 100,000 assets, merging multiple data sets of assets, asset data, roadway data, and others. It provides a seamless experience for using data to make data-driven decisions regarding agency safety and assets. So it's a pretty glowing endorsement, and we appreciate Stan for that. But I just want to pull out a couple of things here, right? The idea of being able to quickly query hundreds of thousands of assets and being able to see it in a way that people can take information. That's where I would point you to as we start going through the demo that we're about to jump into. This is what the power of Numetric is. So let's jump in. So I'm going to give you a real quick overview of just the app, just to orient ourselves, and then we'll run through how the app works using real stories of how people are using the app. When you come into Numetric, the project design app, you come to the home screen, and this shows you your project. It also shows all the projects being done. So if you ever have started a project and you want to continue on it, you click it here. Otherwise, start a new project. I'm going to say Route 91. Well, I have too many numbers in there. And if I know where I'm going to work, so it's mile point 25 through mile point 30. And then what I can do is create. And now I'm working on this project. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the depth. I'm just going to go an overview. On the right here, this is anytime you rotomill anything, you're going to see how deep you rotomilled. On the left, you have your rotomilling depth, surface treatments, markings, and rumble strips. Now, there's a couple of numbers you're going to see. This number right here in the top right corner, this is your total project cost. This will change as you add and subtract, but this is the entire project. These numbers right here link directly to whatever subsection they're in. So you always know your rotomilling depth. Once you add surface treatments, you'll know what your surface treatment costs are. Same with markings. So this will be here, this number will be here no matter what you're working on. So as we go to assets and we wanted to change and add assets, this number will stay here and you can always track the total cost. On the left, you have a map. This is going to show you wherever your signs or your assets are. Same thing with barriers, utilities. Jake will get into it some more. One thing that is often used and often requested is, if I want to just download these assets, can I do it? What you're looking at right there, you can hit download, you can download a CSV and have that information as well. On the cost section, once again, that overall number stays here. Then on the left side, you have your surface and asset costs. So this number will not be changed based on your other costs. This is just your actual surface and asset costs. So if I change my incentives to 3%, this 3% number is based on your surface and asset costs. And that's where your overall project cost will change. One other thing, everything is configurable. So if white paint isn't $25.30, I can go in and change it to $25.50. And that updates the whole cost. So Jake will get into that some more, but once again, from an orientation standpoint, here's what he's about to show you. Summary page gives you a summary of what you're looking at, all your costs laid out for you, as well as once you save, you can create reports that can then easily be understood. But we won't dive into that here. This is just the orientation. But let's jump into the actual demo, right? Let's see what this actually looks like. So to do this, let's give Jake a scenario. So Jake's scenario is Jake's in region 1 and receives a list of potential project sites and needs to submit conceptual designs to show the costs for these projects. So the idea here is you don't want to just go start working on projects, right? You want to understand the costs and what projects are actually going to give you the biggest benefit. So Jake's given a list of potential project sites. We need to get some conceptual costs so we can actually make those decisions. So Jake's going to walk us through how he does this. But before Jake does, Jake's ready, by the way. He is on the edge of his seat for this. Before he does, I want everybody on the phone to think about this. If I were asked to go and do a list of 10, a list of 20 potential sites, how are you going to do this right now? How are you going to go get the data sets? How are you going to put the data sets together? How are you going to create a report that shows the costs, that shows what's on the road, what exists? And then how do you share this report to the people who are going to be making the judgments on which projects we're going to do and which we're not going to do? All right, Jake, give us a go.
Okay. Just one step back a little bit before I hop into this. In getting a list of, where should I even look to do conceptual designs, we have other tools that can help generate lists based on pavement condition and a whole slew of other attributes with the pavement. And so getting a list of, say, 30 for, let's say I'm in Region 1, as Danny said, developing these conceptual designs and costs that eventually will get rolled up into the state level for funding of projects. I just want to get them conceptual costs without spending a bunch of time and resources. So I got to look at my list, and let's say I look and see that Route 30 is the segment that I want to look at from mile point 95 to 100. So I simply start to type in Route 30, and then I could put in my mile points, 95 to 100. You can see over here the surface area as I update any mile points. Let's say, I want to change this to 96. You can see the surface area is updated on the fly as I update the different mile points. And my engineering defaults, I'm up in Region 1, so I'm going to keep the cost consistent with that particular region, and I'll select Create. So right off the bat, I've taken, as Stan's quote mentioned, over 100,000 different assets, and I've kind of filtered out all of the noise that's outside of the route that I want to look at. So now I'm looking at this 4-mile stretch of road, and I can think to myself, okay, if I'm going to rotomill out an inch, I got my costs, I'm going to add something back to the road. So you can see my cross section there. I'm going to add a 1/2 inch HMA, and maybe I'll throw in chip seal overlay. As I do that, the costs for these particular items are shown per treatment type as well as a total. I can go ahead and update the depth if I need to, as well as the unit weight. Let's say for 1/2 inch HMA, I want to use a unit weight of 155. As I update that unit weight, you can see the costs and the tons that we're calculating, again, updated on the fly. Striping information is available. We're going to, put back 2 applications of each of these different types of striping, as well as we can see that there are some centerline rumble strips along this 4-mile section of road that we can replace there. So costs are all updating, as Danny mentioned over here on the top, for the entire project. And I can now very quickly move on to what assets are out in the field that I may want to consider replacing. Again, we have a quick select button where we're looking at condition. If I just want to look and replace pour signs, it looks like there's only one. Here it is on the map, and I may want to also include fair signs. So you can see very quickly I'm able to look at fair and pour signs, 3 signs that total about $10,000. If I wanted to get a little bit more information, I can click on any of these signs. I get some additional summarized information about this particular sign and a Google Street View of that sign that I can look at. And if it's hard to see, you can make this much larger, and you can see this mile marker sign. It's a little bit bent at the top, which is probably why it was considered poor condition. And I can go through a list of all my signs and either select them all, see how much that would even cost, or again, I can select what I want. So let's do fair and poor. I can now hop to barriers, which is next. I can see the different end types, and let's say I want to select all my W-beam and replace those. Again, similar to signs, you have a Google Street View that you can interact with within the application. I see where my W-beam barriers are, and some additional information very quickly. And then the same with utilities. Looks like there's just catch basin there. So we'll just replace that. If we wanted to look at it again, we can by selecting on that road data. Next, we're on to the costs. Initially, I selected Region 1 default costs. If those are all displayed over here on the right for each of the different types of asset and pavement treatments that I'm considering replacing for this this conceptual project. If any of those need to change, again, I can come and say, you know what, W-beam is going to be $20.80. And that has updated my surface area costs, my engineering defaults or other costs. For this scenario, let's just say I'll keep those the same. And then I can hop over to my summary page where I can put in a potential project number, 1, 2, 3, 4, and any notes. Even a project year, I have a drop down that I can select, you know, it's going to happen 2020. But here, that quickly, it's been about 4 or 5 minutes. I've been able to collect all the quantities for this 4-mile section of road that I would consider replacing for a pavement preservation project, as well as all of the different costs. So now I can simply save this project, and let's do Route 30, mile point 96 to 100. So now I can give it a name, and I can categorize this as something that I know I'm going to remember. So this is the Region 1, maybe 2020 list. Remember, I'm going to be doing, you know, anywhere from 20 to 40 of these conceptual reports that will eventually get sent up to the state level for consideration and funding. So I'm just going to keep a running list under that category name of Region 1 2020. Now, as I save that project, you can see I have a few more options up here at the top. The first I'm going to go through is the PDF. Again, I can give this a name of tests. This is requested by, I'll just put State DOT. Can name that, whatever you'd like. And that quickly, I have a PDF report that shows where the project location is, the route mile points, shows it on a map, as well as all of the quantities and the costs associated with this conceptual report. So Danny earlier talked about consistency, and when at the state level having to juggle through, you know, over 100 of these conceptual reports and determine funding and prioritizations, it's critical that these reports come in at in a consistent manner in order to you know, maximize resources and time and money. And so this is a report that can be saved, downloaded, emailed, and a part of this conceptual report. The other deliverable we have from this report is a worksheet. So this will download an Excel file that breaks out each of the different aspects of the conceptual report that we just walked through. So in Excel, this will show where all of our signs, and it'll go through the individual signs, barriers, utilities. So we have this project detail page here that's showing, and then we're going to go to, you know, how much is getting rotomilled out, the volume for the surface treatments, what markings, different striping, and how many pavement messages such as stop bars, crosswalks, how many of those are a part of this project, as well as the length of rumble strips. You can see the 3 signs the 2 poor condition or 2 fair and 1 poor condition. These are some additional information about these different signs, barriers, that 1 catch basin, as well as kind of a summary page of the costs, of what the costs are, what our other engineering costs, percentages are of the project, as well as the quantities. So it's a cleanly formatted report that's digestible when you're looking at, 8 to 10 different data sets in compiling a project, a conceptual project.
Cool. Jake, we're going to have you do another one of these because you have a list of 30 to do before we get off of this webinar. So hope you're ready. But before Jake gets into doing another one, I want to take a second, and I just kind of want everybody to sit back and think, what did Jake just do? Like, how much information did Jake just compile? How many different data sets did Jake just touch? So I was kind of making some notes as he was doing this. Jake was able to get rotomilling costs, treatment costs, square footage, marking cost, rumble strip information, rumble strip cost, sign information or sign cost, barrier information, costs, utilities, the information about them and their costs. All of that, as he was walking through in that, what we said was about a 4 or 5 minute exercise, right? So I know that this stuff's always exciting anyway, but for me, the idea that you can actually go in and just start diving into the data instead of being like a data wrangler first is the most exciting thing about this. I can actually go in and do the job that I want to do, which is get me the information and let me start making some decisions. So very cool to see you just churn through that much data that quickly, Jake. And like I said, and going back to Stan's comment, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of assets and different things, and Jake was able to get to the exact assets that he needed because they were combined in such a way that he could see them right away. So Jake, let's do a second one.
Okay, I'm going to go, again, pretty quickly through this one, but I'm going to do a much smaller section. I'm going to select, maybe Route 92. I'm going to get specific on the mile points. Let's do 1.5 to 1.9. Instead of using whole mile points, we could break it down to decimals and just look at this one tiny segment with the surface area calculated right off the bat. So again, I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna add a 1/2 inch. I'm gonna rotomill out. I'm gonna add my 1/2 inch. Let's do 3/4 inch HMA, and let's overlay. I guess we could put some asphalt slurry seal. So I'm gonna go back to this really quick. This is a list of any of the surface treatments that the state typically uses. They can utilize, they can have on a list here, they can have that option to lay down to do different scenarios if needed. We'll get into a little bit later about incorporating some safety measures into some of these conceptual designs and how easy and intuitive that is, utilizing some of the other Numetric tools as well. But let's say we have our surface treatments there for this small patch that we're going to be replacing, as well as all the striping. We'll keep that. And for this area, let's go through and just say, you know what, we're gonna, these are all in good condition. I think we're good on the signs. Looking at that barrier, we'll take a quick look at it. Looks to be in decent condition. Let's not replace that either. All of these different utilities, we may be raising the road up, so let's go ahead and look at some of the different manholes to replace those. All my costs seem to be, in line with what I'm considering for this conceptual design, as well as the engineering costs. So that quickly I can come through, enter in a project number, any notes, I have my quantities, and again, this is going to get saved, Route 92, mile point 1.5 to 1.9, just a small little area there. And because I created my category already with Region 1 2020 list, I'm just gonna add that to it, save that design. And if I needed to see the PDF, I have that available. I can save it, email it, print it out, and that's all ready to go. So now I can come back to my list and I see, within 10, 15 minutes, I've got 2 of the different conceptual reports needed that for consideration that I'll be submitting them to the state.
2 for 28, you're getting there. So once again, let's just take a second and think through, how am I doing this process right now? What do the steps look like for me right now if I were told, hey, we need a conceptual report for route X from mile points Y to Z? What does that look like? What does that assignment look like for me today? And how much different is it compared to what Jake's doing? All right. One thing before we go any further, we've had some questions come in on the Zoom, and we're going to get to those at the end. But if this is just another invitation, if anybody has any questions they want to ask, go into Zoom and you can ask questions, and we'll get to those at the end. All right, Jake, let's do one more.
Sure.
How many more do you want to do?
Could do one more.
Okay.
1 or 2.
We'll see how this one goes. Now, so Jake, take us through the next one. What are your thoughts on this next one? Is this on your list, or is this coming from a different place?
No, yeah, let's get away from the list and let's look at maybe a different scenario that incorporates a little bit of safety and some maintenance as well. So I'm going to select new design. So a few years ago, studies were done on different types of barriers. One in particular called Texas Turndown, where for safety reasons, they seem to not be that effective. So in the state of Texas, they did some research that over 700 crashes occurred at a Texas Turndown, and almost half of the vehicles overturned. And so they were looking at some safety data, wondering why so many cars were overturning when they were hitting a barrier, and they noticed it was the type of turn down, and there were some fatalities and a lot of serious injuries. And so one thing that on the safety side you could look at is, okay, where are my Texas turndowns and how can I get them replaced, and how do I know which ones to replace first? How do I prioritize those? So with Numetric, we have other applications. We've done webinars on a lot of our safety information with crash data and helping identify where some of those are. But let's say I want to, go and I'm a safety engineer, and I notice that a lot of them are occurring on a particular route. I just want to make sure, and I can come here and say, you know what, I want to look at Route 95. Specific mile point, there are a lot of crashes, rollover crashes, hitting fixed objects in this particular area. You can see it's going through the mountains. It's pretty windy. And I'll select create. Now, as I come in here, I really don't care about rotomilling or any surface types. I don't even really care about the striping. So I'm going to deselect those. I want to go to my assets, and I can see that there are some signs out there. They're all in good condition. But I want to look at some of these barriers. A lot of W-beam, and you can see in the map, they're grayed back for a reason. It's because they're not selected. So if I select one W-beam, you can see it's comes forward in blue, and I can look at this particular W-beam, and let's make it bigger. And I can look to see, is this a type of Texas Turndown? You can see that this barrier, that indeed it is, and you can even scroll up ahead within the application in Google Earth to see that, this end also goes down. And you can go through and look at each of the different types of, it seems to be, there's another one again, W-beams that go into identifying where some of these are. And so as an engineer, and again, this can be very quick at the conceptual level, I I could look at the Jersey barrier, but you could see that that wouldn't be the case. I can come over here and say, you know, I just want to look at all the W beams. There's 19 barriers. I can see what it potentially would cost to replace them all. You know, I don't care about utilities. I can go to my costs and say, you know what, a lot of these are pretty much going to go to zero if we were to do a particular project like this. So now that quickly, and I'm using the same, we call project design app to really hone in on a specific type of asset in a specific location. And whether you're on the maintenance side and you're thinking, okay, where do I got to replace these? You're here with the assets, you see where the mile points are, you see where they are on a map. You can simply download this data as well, straight to Excel, and you have that information available. Again, you can pull this information up on as you're out on the road and identify where each of these locations are at. Again, you can fill out this information, you can save it, you know, Texas Turndown, replacement, and using, we'll just close replacement. So we can create a new category and utilizing not only the Numetric's project design app, but some of the other safety applications that we have. We can work together and collaborate across several different organizations and working together to improve maintenance, improve the assets out in the field, as well as improve safety overall at the state level.
That's fascinating, Jake. So what would you say the biggest, you kind of just went through like a whole bunch of benefits you get out of that, but what do you think the biggest benefit to people in the field would be to run a report like that?
So there are a lot of benefits. One of the main benefits is just the speed that you can get all this information at. Just because I ran this 10-mile section around Route 95 doesn't mean that that's what we should be doing. The fact that I can run that in 3 minutes and then collaborate with my coworkers, with the maintenance group, with other people in the safety group and say, you know what, we need to maybe expand that to 15 miles, or we need to shrink it down to 5 miles. The ability to iterate on any conceptual design in a few minutes is something that just isn't done right now. So that's one of the greatest benefits of whether you're out in the field or whether you're sitting, you know, in the office. The fact that you can iterate on just about any of these in a few minutes is super beneficial in really identifying the best projects, essentially trying to get the best bang for your buck. You know, you don't have to take weeks to do a conceptual design like this, and then when someone comes back and says, you know what, maybe we can expand that an extra 5 miles or 3 miles, you got to go back and do the same work for, you know, another week or two. Yeah. And so this speeds up the process. It gets questions answered much more quickly and action to be taken.
Nice. So I actually want to touch on one more thing about that. So the way that Numetric's set up, Jake talks about you can go talk to other divisions, other things. The way that the Numetric software works is whoever you want to, you could give access to within your Department of Transportation, they could have access to Numetric. There's no extra fees, no extra charges. All the DOT employees could have this. So if you wanted to share a project with someone right away, right, you wouldn't have to go find them and have a conversation with them necessarily. And that's probably a good thing to do. But you can be working on these things and sharing them as soon as you're creating them, right, Jake?
Yes.
Yeah. So while we do have the reports that you can download and go out, if you have created this route, and someone says, well, I want to know what that would be, just taking it out an extra 2 miles, if they have the project, they could just take that and do it themselves without even going through that step of coming back to you. They could look at that and extend those extents. So I think you're right on. Well, let's stop there. Jake wants to do 27 more of these to get to 30, but I think we're actually going to stop right there. And so at this point, I would just, one last time before we get into Q&A and answer some questions, I would just say think about how your department works right now. Think about what processes you use to get these type of analysis done, and understand or have questions about, like, what are the differences? What would it take to change a culture? What would it take to get us to move forward, to get us to be more proactive, to get us to be able to work on projects quicker and in the exact same way, so that when we do all submit projects, when we have our 9 regions in our state submitting conceptual designs, the person reviewing them understands them quickly because they're all uniform and they're all using the same data. How do we get there? And we've showed you what we believe is a good path to get you there, because of the problems that we're facing. So let's talk about some of the questions that have come in. Jake, you want to start off, or do we? Yeah, Jake, you want to start off with the questions?
Yeah, let me see what we got. Okay. Okay, so if we were looking to do a conceptual design for a project that wouldn't be built for a few years, is inflation accounted for in the cost as we select the project year?
Yeah, so Jake showed at the end of, on that summary page, he showed what year would this be done in, and that can be configured with an inflation cost to say, to account for inflation. It's on summary page and right there in your project year. So that can not only tell you what year it's going to be done, but it actually can have inflation built into it to account for that.
Okay. Just to add on that, when you are designing a conceptual report in the concept list, I can come down here and add an inflation tab. And I'm going to say that's going to be 2%, and it's going to calculate what the dollars are for that. And so, as Danny said, it can be built into the project year. If inflation, just to add some flexibility, it can be entered in as a line item. So I can continue to add other cost items if they don't show up here in kind of these default of other costs.
Yeah, I actually think, so Jake and I obviously answered that question the same and differently. You can totally account for inflation. That is one of the powers of Numetric. It is highly configurable. So we do have states who are using, some people want that project year just to be what year do we think this is going to happen? And then other people actually want the inflation of, well, if we're pushing this out 2 years, what does this do to the cost? And so if you want to do it manually, like Jake said, you wouldn't tie it to the year, but other people want it different. And so that's the power of the configurations of the Numetric platform.
Okay. Another question here, how long does an application like this take to implement? And I'll take that one, Danny, if you don't mind. A lot of work has gone into redesigning this particular application, where it can be built and implemented in anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks. So it's a fairly quick implementation, and there are a lot of variables that go into that kind of wide range of implementation time. I mean, things that go into this type of implementation range from data, just aggregating the data, taking the data from different sources if it's there, but having the data within the Numetric platform. It includes any data cleansing that may need to happen. It can go down to configuring the application, doing some internal testing once it's built, rolling it out to a very small group within the state for external testing or in a region, and it includes training. So all within this 6 to 12 week period, we're going from looking at data, at your asset data and pavement data, all the way to testing, app configuration, and even training, all within that short period of time. So this is a software as a service. It's a web-based platform, and so as Danny mentioned before, this is something that would be accessible to anybody at the state level or the region level. The implementation of this, again, considering that it's web-based, it's a SaaS product, is fairly quick. So anywhere from that 6 to 12 range, 6 to 12 week range.
All right, so thanks, Jake. This question actually ties a lot to what Jake just went over, but I think it's worth going over because there's a subtle nuance. What if we have the data, but it's not in our group? How do we get it? So that's a good question, and that has happened with every Department of Transportation we've worked with has not had all of the data in a single vertical. What we've found is it's actually been pretty easy to get the groups to work together. Now, granted, that's a big like asterisk on like, well, what do you consider easy? But as Jake showed, with the safety data and being able to do safety projects, there's a lot of just questions about, well, why do you need the data and how are you going to use the data? The ability that Numetric's been able to go into DOTs and actually show them, this is the data that we need, this is how we're going to use it, this is what's going to benefit you. And by the way, like Jake said, we're going to put it through a rigorous Q&A process to make sure that it's cleansed data and it's easy to use. That helps people get on board really quickly because they understand how not only providing the data to somebody else is the right thing, but everybody that we've worked with so far has understood how this would help them in the roles they're in. Because this product and Numetric's suite impacts so many different groups, they've all been willing to work together to get their information to a place where it benefits all of them. So we understand the problem, we've worked through the problem, but with that clear idea of what data do we need, how we're going to use it, and how it will benefit you, those conversations go pretty well. Okay. I think we have time for one more, Jake.
Okay. Yeah. How is the data updated? Is a question, and I'll take that. Yeah. Maybe if you have any comments, Danny, you can share. Getting updated data within the Numetric platform over the last, I'll take a step back, over the last several months, a lot of improvement has gone into this application with a new interface, but a lot in the back end as well, where updating data isn't hard anymore. It's fairly simple, and as new data collection cycles come through, with this new interface, it takes essentially a day, because it takes a few hours to get the data updated and then just some internal and external testing. So it's a very, very quick turnaround whenever a new data collection cycle has been done, along with some testing and getting that updated. Now, we have talked with a few states about having real-time asset information within the application. States are at all different levels of where they're at with asset collection, where it's stored, how it's stored. Similar to what we do with our crash information, if it's in a database that is updated, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, we can connect to those types of databases and pull in the asset information. So typically it's done at regular cycles, whether that's semi-annually or annually, but it can go all the way down to, daily, if the state's infrastructure with their asset management systems are updated that often. So that's a great question, because it's something that's been fairly hard to do. And over the last few months, we've been able to figure that out and get it dialed in.
Perfect. All right, so just in closing, there's Jake's email address. Jake loves getting questions. So, but in all seriousness, feel free, if you have any questions that didn't get answered, we know there were a couple, we'll reach out to those people. But if you have some questions that didn't get asked and you have them, there's Jake's email address, and he will take those, or we'll work with getting them from Jake and answering those questions. If you have any other questions, or you want to see what else Numetric's doing, please feel free to go to our website. There's case studies, videos, and more. And once the recording of this video is ready, we'll email you and let you know that it's there. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and hope everybody has a good and safe day. Thank you.